Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Soul-u-tions podcast. My name is Simkins, and I am your host for the next 20-ish minutes or so. Today, we're going to talk about a question that I have received over the last week. And I thought, listen, if people are asking me this question in real life, I'm sure you want to know the answer as well. So the question is ... I'll see you on the other side of the intro and let you know.
Einstein said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." Most everyone in the world is solving their problems the wrong way. Our problems come from our thinking, and we can solve them with our thinking. So whether you're at your lowest, just trying to grow, or whether you are trying to sustain growth over your lifetime, join us as we push the boundaries of our current thinking and redefine how we find solutions.
The hope and the strength and the love and the smiles and the laughter of friends and family. Add it up, you'll find no limit to the possibilities.
Okay, I know the suspense is killing you, but the question is, it's so I don't know, simple to me because it is what I do for a living, but it still is I think, confounding to a lot of people. So here's the question. What exactly is a life coach? What does a life coach do? And why do people hire life coaches? Why would you want to work with a life coach? Well, first of all, let me tell you this. A life coach is just a person who has experienced some things in her life and is a person who has a knack for truly investigating and getting to the bottom of what is this human experience all about. I thought it was going to be different than it is. And I have found myself in places in life that I never imagined that I would be. And because of that, there's some skill sets that I really wanted to have to develop for myself in order to get through those periods of time, but not just to survive those periods of time or get through those periods of time, but to truly take that life experience and use that life experience to create something that I didn't have before, and maybe even create something better than the life I had previously imagined. And so in this process, what I have learned and what I have discovered through my own personal experience and my own studies are a few things that I was never told. And when I was growing up or in high school, in fact, you probably were told a very similar story to what I was told, which is, here's the recipe for success: study hard, work hard, make great grades, get into the best school that you can get into, choose a profession that will give you some stability in life and support you in the quality of life that you want to have. Get married, have children, buy a house, and live happily ever after. And so I followed that exact recipe for success and for happiness. And then I hit the age of 36, 37, and I had achieved, accomplished, acquired, accumulated all the things I could just check down the checklist, except for one. I was lost on the inside. I wasn't happy on the inside. And I thought, well, if you're supposed to get married and live happily ever after, perhaps it was my marriage that was the source of, the thing that could be better. And my husband was really wise about this. He said, you know what, sweetheart? I think this is something you have to do for yourself. I don't think this is a hole that I'm going to be able to help you fill, that you need to go on whatever your own personal journey is to figure out what's missing for you. You know, what is that missing ingredient? And so I did that. I had 3 children, great marriage, the house, partnership in a law firm in town, lots of clients, great community service and boards that I was involved in. And in all of like the spare minutes of the day, maybe in a car ride between my house and the office, because back then we didn't have podcasts. We didn't even have an iPhone back then, but I did have a subscription to Audible. So I started downloading audiobooks, and I remember Oprah was doing this big thing with Eckhart Tolle called like A Whole New Earth, and she was doing this online class. So I started watching that online class, you know, at night before I was going to bed, and then I started listening to the audiobook, Eckhart Tolle's audiobook, in my car ride, like riding from my house to downtown Augusta to the office. If I needed to go pick up and run an errand, I would just pop that audiobook on play and listen to it from here to there. And I just started filling myself up and making these 10, 15, 20-minute deposits of someone else's ideas or teachings, something that was new in the world, some new thoughts about life, something that wasn't exactly happily ever after. It was more in the vein of when humans kind of get to a crossroads in their lives, why does that happen? What's going on? And how do you choose which way to go when you're in that crossroad? I signed up for yoga retreats in Costa Rica, and eventually I started working with a life coach. But what was really interesting at the time was that I was so ashamed that I had failed to discover happiness in what must be the recipe for happiness. Like, I had followed and checked everything off the list. So the fact that I wasn't happy, I didn't feel like I could talk about that with anyone. I had had an amazing childhood, so there wasn't this big capital T trauma that I had experienced. It had been a very ordinary life, like just a really good life. And here I was, lost in the middle of it at the ripe old age of 36 or 37. And it didn't seem like anybody else was having any trouble in life. So there wasn't really anyone to talk to about it. I mean, like, my mom had never, my dad was a partner in a law firm. My mom was like amazingly brilliant and bright, and she wanted this future for me that she had not had in the opportunity to practice law. And then I also wanted to be married and have children. So my dad obviously had not been a mom and practiced law, so I didn't have him to turn to there. And then I had a lot of friends, a lot of whom were staying at home, some of whom who had babies 10 years before me, and then now were getting back into work, whereas I was like, had worked and then had children a little bit later. I mean, there just wasn't. And of course, my dear husband, he was, you know, in his trajectory, but it was different than mine. And so I didn't feel like there was anybody who truly understood what I was going through. And like I said, I felt ashamed. I thought that I must have failed at something. And so I kind of hid it on the inside of me, right? It was an interior type of secret that I carried around. And on the outside, I was fun and happy and going about all the things that one goes about. But on the inside, there was this, just this hole, this void, this sense that I was missing something, and that I must have missed school the day that the super secrets were handed out. Like there was the cheat sheet, the one day that I must have missed school where all of this was discussed and everybody else got it. Well, in my search for the secret that I had missed, I started to dive into a lot of ancient wisdom teachings and lots of different faith traditions and texts. And I started to just stumble upon this dark night of the soul idea. And it was an idea of a very faithful person who had a rich and deep personal faith, but then they just lose this sense of closeness that they had with this sense of a God or a loving creator. Like at some point there's this, felt like it was a internal disconnect, right? Like just the flip switched and they couldn't find that connection. And I was like, that is the closest thing to what I am experiencing that I have ever run across. And then there was this kind of deep religious tradition in all these different faiths of Christianity, Buddhism, even Sufism, lots of, what do you call that, in the mystics, in the mystic tradition. And of course, this is St. John of the Cross who had written about the dark night of the soul. So I had collected all of this material and I kind of put it over on the side of okay, faith, traditions, blah, blah, blah. And then being an English major, and so having studied lots of great world literature and poetry, there was this other type of blueprint for what I was experiencing. And so this has been discussed and talked about as the hero's journey, that every person who is born onto planet Earth, every single one of us is our own hero. And we all go through a certain life progression and a life experience. Now, those are personal to us, right? Like my life experience is very different from David's, who's behind the curtain, waving to y'all now. And like I said, it was different from my mother's, it was different from my dad's, my husband's, my siblings, right? Even though we grew up, or I have lived with, people, my life experience, how I went through life was very personal to me, as was theirs to them, as is yours to you. But underneath what that personal experience is, there are these common intersections, kind of like the dark night of the soul. But in the hero's journey, it's put into this framework. There is the call. Every single one of us has a call to, now that's intentionally vague, but it is this idea that there's an invitation to you. It does not come in your mail and it doesn't show up in your email inbox. It's more like this other, sense, this sixth sense that you have, this other type of knowing. And I know this could sound a little woo-woo and out there, but I want you to stick with me because I just think that it's just something we haven't been able to capture and measure yet, except through the lens of literature or faith texts, right? Like enough of this framework of a human life repeats itself in all of these and all this literature that could be used as a measurement in and of itself, that this thing called the call isn't woo-woo, it's actually something we experience. And when people have a hard time thinking that we have capacities that we haven't been able to measure yet, I just always remind people, like, I had a golden retriever. If you've had a dog or an animal, that dog can sense, my dog could sense a storm coming. She was terrified of thunderstorms, Lucky was, but she knew when one was coming. Now, how did she know? She does not have an iPhone with the weather app on it, and she's not getting alerts that there is, a hurricane coming or a tornado coming. But she had some sense that one was coming, that she could feel through some type of evolutionary capacity to be in touch with something that I don't know that I am as in touch with. I couldn't tell you that a storm was coming, but I could look at her and know that a storm was coming. So I want you to think of the call as something like that. So in mythology, and if you ever read, the Odyssey, it's a great version of this, or in more, what's the lightning thief? Oh, Percy Jackson. Yes, thank you, David. Percy Jackson, right? There are all these kind of myths that are out there. So you have the hero, that's you, that's me, it's David over there, and we receive a call. And we have free will, of course, and oftentimes when we receive this call, we ignore it. We turn our backs to the call. We're like, that is the craziest thing. There's this feeling, this urge, this desire. I don't understand it. I don't know where it's coming from. Like, I'm just going to ignore that and go about the busyness of my life. Well, the thing about a call, it is pretty doggone insistent. It's like that 2-year-old toddler that's like, me, like pulling on you, that's like, I need your attention right now. And the more you ignore that 2-year-old, like the more the 2-year-old has to depend upon some louder shenanigans to get your attention, until eventually they are jumping up and down and wailing and screaming. The call acts a little bit like a 2-year-old that has got to get your attention. It's a messenger. And it's just like, you have to accept this message. You have to read it. You can turn it away, but you have got to pay attention to me. And so I think, one of the things, if you're getting back to what does a life coach do? What is a life coach is someone who understands these larger frameworks of what it means to be human. And these are not new frameworks. They're very, very old frameworks. But for whatever reason, over the last, couple of 100 years, this type of wisdom has just fallen away. But because we live in this most amazing time, this information age, we are able to have so much access, right? We're regaining all of this access to all of these amazing teachings and wisdom, and we can kind of dust this off and see that, overlay that blueprint onto someone who is alive in 2023, who's 56 like me in 2023, or at that time, it was 2007 or 6, and I was 36 or 37. It is still applicable. And so what this framework tells us is that after the call, and after this period of ignoring the call, and the call continuing back, you get to this place where you accept it or you don't accept it. If you do accept the call, then you're going out on this new adventure, this new journey in life. And obstacles will inevitably come up along the way. Now, I want you to compare this type of framework to the, girl grows up, has some hardship growing up, and falls in love with Prince Charming. They get married and they live happily ever after, as there's no more hardship, right? It's just happily ever after. And when you find yourself like I was and you're not happy, it's like I failed at that. So that's the framework that we have grown up with and been indoctrinated with. But this other framework says, no. Every hero, every one of us, you, me, David, we're all heroes. We will all encounter obstacles. And so don't be surprised by those obstacles. The obstacles are the way to honing you. Like there's some kind of gift that you can bring. When you meet that obstacle, there's some kind of magic that happens. If you don't crumble up and crawl into a fetal position and stay there, if you go through that moment, but then you pick yourself up and you meet the challenge head on and you find a way through that challenge, you will come through it a changed person. You'll come through it different than you are right now, different than before you encounter that obstacle. Now, what the hero's journey also tells us is that you're going to hit multiple obstacles in your life. Now, this is not going to seem fair to some of you. It did not seem fair to me when I hit the largest obstacle of my life, which was when my son Brennan, who was 7, was diagnosed with leukemia, and we went through really 3.5 to 4 years of holy hell on earth, and all of the treatments, chemotherapy, radiation, the toxicity of those treatments. I had one doctor that said, the only difference between Brennan and a Hiroshima victim is that Brennan has had a bone marrow transplant, and so he has a new immune system. But he has seen as much toxicity in the treatments in trying to save his life as someone who was a victim in Hiroshima. Now, that's really crazy to think about. So when you come through that type of a situation, on the other side of it, I truly expected that we would get a get out of jail free card for the rest of our lives. And I was a little angry at the continued hardship and obstacles that Brennan would face, both additional type of complications physically from a new disease that we had to create in him that was equally as life-threatening as leukemia, to how he wasn't able to go to other kids' birthday parties and all the things that he quote unquote missed out on. And I was like, this just isn't fair to a child to have to go through this. So again, I had to kind of meet that obstacle. I had to meet my own belief system again with going back to all the books, going back to all the treatises that I had collected from the first time around. And then I added on this new discipline called life coaching, which, as a lawyer, I will tell you, really meshes beautifully with the foundational training of a lawyer, which involves the Socratic method. You question everything. You ask a lot of questions. You are trained to make arguments in favor of positions that you would not normally be inclined to get behind, right? Because your job is to advocate for someone else's position within the framework of the law. So a life coach is someone who has, like a lawyer, a very specific level of expertise that not everybody else has, because you haven't studied like all of these traditions and you haven't lived through them to question them. And so in the ability to synthesize the reality of life and the wisdom that's out there, and then to be able to spot patterns. Lawyers are trained to spot issues and to be able to identify what the issue is and align it with a remedy. So I use that same skill set as a life coach, where I'm not diagnosing my clients. I am not a therapist. I am not a counselor. I'm not diagnosing things. I'm looking more at this framework of, oh, you're at this place in your life you didn't expect to be, ever. You were never prepared for, you were prepared for happily ever after. So now you're not happy and you're thinking you failed. You get through that and you come up against like this crazy new obstacle. For us, it was a health scare for our child, but for other people, it could be in your marriage, it could be with your parents, it could be in your work. And you come up against this obstacle that you didn't expect. Prime example, COVID. We have all had this similar, very specific experience of a global pandemic. And we get through it, and there's that human desire to have the get out of jail free card, that we should be through it by now. That's the way I felt at that point with Brennan when we came home. We weren't through it. We continue to have other obstacles. And so I had to continue to grapple with, have I failed again? Like I went back through all of those things, but what I discovered was all that I had learned back when I was 36, now I was 42 to 45 or so. Like, oh, this framework works. And it enabled me to get through this point in time faster. And it also enabled me to lead my family through this time faster. So in that process, I became certified as a life coach, and I was getting more and more questions from people. I was noticing this pattern that a lot of people were now going through similar things than what I had gone through before. And what I realized was, and this is one of the Buddha's teaching, that there is pain in the world. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And so while we cannot protect another human being from experiencing pain, my husband could not protect our son Brennan from having the experience at age 7 of being diagnosed with leukemia. But what we could do was meet that experience and make something of it, right? For us, it was like, we're going to still have a fun childhood. We're going to still play games. We're going to still like love each other. We're going to laugh. We're going to do things. Yes, you're going to throw up, and we're going to have to move and do all these things, but we're also going to meet it head on and create something from that could help other people. So you can hear this, you can hear the call in there again, right? You can hear there was another call that we heard in that obstacle. And I think this is important because you can have multiple calls in a lifetime. It's not a one shot and one done thing. Like, your life is long and beautiful, I hope and pray for you. And if you live a long and beautiful life, you will have multiple calls, multiple things that you can create out of it. So during that time, I'm wearing this hat today because it's September when I'm recording this, and that is National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. So one of the calls that we heard with Brennan was, children need cures that they don't have, and only 4% of the National Institutes of Health cancer budget goes to pediatric cancers. And so there was a gap that we stepped into with our friends and co-founders. And with all of our dear friends and donors who wanted to do something, we used this obstacle as an opportunity to leave this part of the world or this part of some people's hero's journey better and easier. And so in the process, we have raised well over $5 million, and we've leveraged that with other parent-driven organizations and other organizations to be combined over $100 million worth of investments in childhood cancer research, and we are on the cutting edge of some really incredible things that are going to change how pediatric cancer is treated. But along the way, over the last 12 years, we've created cures that have extended the lives of children and that have kept families together. And I'm so proud of that. And then being a life coach is just someone who can meet you where you are and say, you have not failed at this thing called life. You're just at a crossroads. And I can make your navigation through this crossroads easier. I can serve as a guide. I know the frameworks, the ones I've shared with you today. I have studied those frameworks. I've put them all together. I have something that is going to help decrease the unnecessary suffering that you are going to experience as a human being. I'm going to teach you, I'm going to educate you on these things, and I'm going to help you ask questions that are designed to get you through this time versus staying stuck. So that is really what a life coach does on one end. I always tell people I have two types of clients. The types of clients who come to me because they're in this challenging, difficult time and they want a guide to get through it. Then there are other people who have a purely aspirational call, but it's so out of the box, they don't have a model for anyone who's ever done it before in their life. And I help them clear a new path for themselves, one that will help them and help others. It just hasn't been done before, or at least it hasn't been modeled to them before. That doesn't mean it can't be done. It just isn't, there's no recipe yet to follow for it. But there are these other frameworks that will help you achieve those, right? Help you take that desire, take that aspirational call that you have within you and make it a reality. So that's kind of the stuff that you do when you work with a life coach, right? You just have a partner, someone who is clear-headed, who is level-headed, who's not in the muck of your stuff, who can hold the space for you and the belief in you that you are going to get through this, that we are going to minimize any suffering, and that we are going to leave, whatever this challenge that you met, we're going to leave your life and the lives of others better than it was when you met it head on. So if you really want to work with a life coach, please message me. I would love to talk to you either about joining us in the Soul-u-tions Labs, which is my online learning membership for women of all ages, just lifelong learners who are all interested in how do we get through this thing called life and how do we impact the lives of others. And then if you want to work with me one-on-one, all the fellas and all the ladies, I work with clients one-on-one. And so go to Tara Simkins, TaraSimkins.com and click Work With Me. And all the details are there on my website. In the meantime, keep listening to the podcast. I told you it all started with that Audible account and that online work of Oprah. There's so much free good stuff out there. Turn down the noise in the world. Turn up all of these types of podcasts that will help give you part of the clues, right, to listen to your call and make it through the obstacles. And I'm so excited in the next episode that I'm going to drop. So make sure you've subscribed. Gosh, I'm giving you a lot of instructions in this one thing. But make sure you subscribe because I've got a really cool guest that is coming in here for an interview when I wrap this one up. And you are not going to want to miss it. She has done some of the most incredible things in her life. And I want you to use her life experience as one of those models of how you can do something that you're called to do, but you're not quite sure how. She's going to give you some clues for how she did it. So make sure you turn in next time. Thank you for being here. It's really my great privilege and joy to be a life coach and to be yours on the Soul-u-tions podcast. Thank you, everyone.
'Cause I ain't done living the life I'm meant to lead. And I ain't done loving the ones who cared for me. The hope and the strength and the love and the smiles and the laughter of friends and family. Add it up, you'll find no limit to the possibility.